I'm Matt Hartley and this is Regina Martin. We're from the Money Advice Trust. The Trust is really excited to be a part of this initiative. And the Income and Expenditure Challenge is the challenge that we're supporting, partnering with Nationwide on in particular. Rachel's introduced the challenge. I want to zoom out a little bit and give you a bit of context around debt advice and what we do. And then Regina will give a bit of first-hand experience from the front line of advice. So the Money Advice Trust, we run National Debt Line and Business Debt Line. We're one of the three big debt advice charities alongside Citizens Advice, who you'll hear from later, and Step Change, who are also here. There's also PayPlan, another free-to-client agency, Christians Against Poverty, an ecosystem of charities that are here to support people in problem debt. And there's a real mixture of provisions. Some charities provide face-to-face advice. So what we just heard about digital not being the only answer is really important. And others provide phone, web chat and online. At National Debt Line and Business Debt Line, we offer advice by phone, web chat and online, not face-to-face. We've got a team of close to 200 advisors up in Birmingham on the front line. Last year, National Debt Line helped about 140,000 people by phone, another 43,000 by web chat, and the figures for Business Debt Line was around 36,000. So before too long, we're getting on for 250,000 people. So not a small problem that we are here to address. So who do we help? National Debt Line callers are the majority are in their 30s, 40s, some in their late 20s. Of course, we help right across the age range, but those are the main groups. About 2/3 are in rented accommodation. About 2/3 are in work, as Rachel said. This isn't some of the misconceptions that are out there. This is about people who are in work in the main. And most of them work full-time, but increasingly we're getting part-time people and people with variable incomes too. National Debt Line callers tend to have between 1 and 5 debts, but we help people with as many as 15 or more. Some problems can be extremely complex to resolve. About half, just under half, owed less than £5,000 when they contacted National Debt Line. But a quarter owed more than £15,000. So again, a huge range of debt problems that we help people with. At Business Debt Line, that's our service for self-employed people and other small business owners. About 2/3 of those are self-employed sole traders. And so if you phone National Debt Line, or indeed if you phone Step Change and some other charities, you come through to Business Debt Line, which we'll hear about a bit later. And so why do people come to us? Some of the common reasons are around ill health and disability. That's about 1 in 5 callers. Job loss, another 1 in 5. People with mental health problems causing their financial difficulty or being a factor, around 13% of our callers. And people don't call straight away. 36% wait more than a year after they begin to struggle to seek advice. And 25% wait more than 2 years. And it won't surprise you to hear that the earlier we can get advice to somebody, the quicker and easier their problem is to solve. So we need to bring that down. That's a key challenge. And as I mentioned, there are some really very dangerous myths out there about people in debt. The vast majority of people that all the debt advice charities help are in debt because of circumstances that are entirely outside of their control. You can be bowling along, you can have a job, you can be on top of your budget, and then job loss comes. You get an income shock, you miss a bill, you miss another, and before you know it, you can be in serious difficulty. And the nature of the problems that we help people with has changed a lot over the last 10 years. So about 10 years ago, we were helping a lot of people with what you might call traditional debt problems, credit cards, personal loans. Now it's much more council tax, energy, water bills. The nature of debt problems are changing. And we're supporting more people. So demand this year at National Debt Line is expected to be its highest since 2013. We're expecting about 189,000 calls by the end of the year. So we're seeing more people, their problems are changing, and I'll hand over to Regina, who before joining our digital advice services team spent 9 years on the front line as an advisor, who can tell us a bit about the process.
Thank you. So I'm going to give you a bit of Debt Advice 101, really. And the main focus that we have on the debt advice is to remember that we've got people, and at the end of this process, we're affecting people's lives. So we have 4 main stages that we go through. The first one is what we call income maximisation. That's making sure that the client knows what it is they're entitled to, making sure that every bit of money that's coming into their household is what they're entitled to. So it is things like making sure they've got the right tax code, making sure they're claiming all the benefits that they should be claiming, if there are any grants and things out there that they can claim, making sure that they're doing those things as well. Second stage is actually, I'll go into a little bit more detail later on, but it is your income and expenditure stage. So every single client that we either speak to or deal with online will be encouraged to go through an income and expenditure. That can differ for people on business deadline because obviously they're self-employed, but the main things are know what's coming into your household, and if you're self-employed, it's making sure that you go through the business income and expenditure, put aside for your ongoing taxes, then we can deal with the household. So your household, you're looking at what's coming in, and when we're looking at what's coming in, it's not just what's coming in such as wages and benefits, your obvious things, but they're things like you've got a 23-year-old living in your house who isn't paying you anything. That's an income, you know, talking to them and saying, actually, is there more income that we can get there? And I see some of you laughing, but that's a reality. We also have a look at what's going out of the household as well. So when we're looking at going out, obviously there are those things that we just think about anyway. So if you think about your finances, first thing you think about, right, I've got to keep a roof over my head. So I've got my mortgage, I've got rent, I've got council tax, electricity, gas. But there are also things we have to think about, such as I've got to make sure the cat's fed. Do you know what I mean? You don't just feed yourself, you feed your pets. You've got to make sure that in this age, most of us have got phone lines, digital. We've got to make sure that we're paying our broadband, etc. And these are things that people don't actually think about, and our advisors do have to talk to them about. We also have to think about things like if there are children in the household. Most cases, people will say, oh, no, it's fine, you know, my kids don't have to go on school trips. But actually, we need to actually think about the impact on that child of not going on the school trip when the whole class. My son actually, at the moment, is in Lichfield, which is half an hour away from home. But actually, if he hadn't gone, the rest of his year has gone. And actually, we've got to think about making sure that we put aside for that and making sure we say, right, for the rest of the year, what is it that you've got to put aside? Making sure that we're putting aside for things like your disasters, such as your washing machine when you put your trainers in. Don't do that. So, you know, making sure that you do put aside for things like that. We're making sure that we're not putting things like that into savings, because the reality is that's putting aside for things that could go wrong. We kind of call them maintenance. And your average washing machine's, what, £500? Put that over a year. We've got to think about how much we're putting aside for that as well. When you've done your income and expenditure, the next stage is then to actually deal with your debts. And when we're dealing with debts, we split them into priorities and non-priorities. So your priority debts are debts that you have to pay in order to survive. Those debts, where if you don't pay them, you stand to lose something. Mortgage arrears, obviously stand to lose your home, same with your rent. Council tax, worst case scenario, you can lose your liberty. We all have to pay that by law. Utilities, they can disconnect you, and that's how we would communicate that with clients. Then you have your non-priorities, which fortunately tend to be your banking, that's unsecured. But because the reality is that they have to go through much more of a process to actually take any kind of action against you, and you're less likely to lose your liberty. And so we will go through fair processes of actually dealing with credit cards, loans, overdrafts, etc. Online, we try to mimic that same process. So if a client is using our websites, we'll say, go through your income and expenditure, negotiate with your creditors, etc. The challenges that we have are that when, as an advisor, you speak to somebody, firstly, they don't always have their figures to hand. Some people are plucking figures out of the air. Some people, well, my husband pays that, so I don't have to put that in. Or, well, you know, I'm giving this money away to my daughter who lives in Australia and, you know, she needs this money. So there are lots of challenges that we have as advisors where we have to make sure that we develop a rapport where we can actually have honest conversations with our clients, and we have to say, you're either spending a little bit too much on your food. You know, I appreciate that Waitrose do the best cheese, but Aldi's cheese is pretty good too. You know, having to have those conversations with them. I was listening to some of our advisors the other day, and they were talking in the kitchen about how one of them was speaking to a client who was saying, oh yeah, we spend £80 a month on food. there's 5 of you in the house. Like, that's my weekly shop. You know, I mean, I'm only shopping in Asda. So the conversation that they're having to have with that client to say, I understand that you're really stressed out about your credit cards and your loans, etc., but we've got to make sure that your household can survive, because there are processes that you can go through to help that. Digitally, we have our online budgets that, as I've said before, our clients can go through. Challenges that we have with that is that sometimes people will go on, will complete a budget, what do they do next? And so we can tell them as much as we can. So the challenge we have as an organisation to deal with that digitally is to actually look at it from a behavioural science perspective. So what we're focusing more on now is what we call nudge principles, and saying to people, this is what you need to do next. We're giving you 3 things that you've got to do. So those 4 steps that we're talking about will soon become 3, because people don't do the 4th. It's science. So we're going to 3 steps. Then once you've done that step, what's your next step? And it's not just about doing that budget. Like we said, people have fatigue. You do a budget, you call through to somebody, well, I've got to do my budget again. But actually, when we're talking about people who want to help themselves, it's about giving them the tools to be able to do that and knowing exactly what their next steps are. Back to you.
Thank you, Regina. So I think you got a flavour of just how difficult some of these conversations are that advisors have when going through income and expenditure. There's a lot of challenge, and that's because debt advice charities are there to get the best outcome for the person and the creditor. There is a matter of balance here. The best outcome is for people to repay their debts, and that involves some difficult conversations. It really does, and my hats always go off to when I go up to Birmingham and listen to our advisors. And when I used to work at Step Change, I used to think the same about Step Change advisors as well. They're absolutely extraordinary what they do. Regina's mentioned, talked a lot about this income and expenditure point, and it's just to underline, it's so critical that debt advice agencies get an accurate and efficient way of collecting that information. It's really the cornerstone of the debt advice process. At National Debt Line, it can take up to 20 minutes, often longer, to do that on the phone. And for other agencies with different models, there'll be different figures there. And even then, as Regina says, that information is often not final, it's not complete, it's often not accurate. I mean, who really could put their hand on their heart and say now that they know how much they spend on their energy and their, Rachel's shaking her head. And, it's a difficult thing that we're asking people to do, it really is. So there's a bit of work going on now at National Debt Line to quantify. We've just changed over to the standard financial statement, which is a common tool to assess affordability in income and expenditure. We're doing a piece of work to quantify the potential time saving that open banking could deliver, or a solution based on open banking could deliver based on the phone sort of process. And we're really excited about that opportunity. If we get this right, if we're massively looking forward to what you come up with on income and expenditure, if we can get this right for all the debt advice agencies, we could improve client experience first and foremost, reduce some of the stress out of what is a very stressful situation phoning up. Particularly if you think back to what I said, some people wait 2 years or more before picking up the phone or seeking advice, walking into an advice agency. It's a very difficult situation. If we can reduce some of that stress by improving the client experience, that would be one thing. But in some ways, the even bigger win, the bigger goal, is to actually help many, many more people. Because if we can make the income and expenditure part of the process quicker, more efficient, we can do that. At the moment, all the debt advice agencies are in a similar boat. Demand for debt advice massively outstrips supply. And at the same time, we know from the Money Advice Services research that only 17% of people who need debt advice actually seek it. So that illustrates the enormous gap there is out there between current provision and all the people that could benefit. So if you can help us to improve that part of the process, we can help many more people, as can the other agencies. And ultimately, that would be a good outcome for everybody. Thank you.